How Not to Raise a Bully, The Early Roots of Empathy by Maia, Szalavitz, Time Magazine via Yahoo News, 17th of April 2010. This is the lesson 2.19 and 6 2.25. Lesson 6 of 7, Learn to Parent Effectively, from the website Break the Cycle. As always, the sources of the website are down below. Okay? Since the... Let me read if this is important. Okay. Clicking the underlined links will open a new window. This article describes research that supposes the core premise of this non-profit website, that lack the early childhood nurture significant hinders the psychological and social development of the typical kids. The article is unusual in that it focuses on the essential factor in healthy human relationships, empathy. See my comments after the article. The links and the highlights below are mine, from Peter Garland. Okay? Since January 14, 2010, death of Phoebe Prince, the 15-year-old in South Arley, Massachusetts, who committed suicide after being bullied by fellow students, many onlookers have dedicated on whether the circumstances that led to her after-school hanging might have been avoided. Could teachers have stepped in and stopped the bullying? Could parents have done more than curtail bad behavior? Or could preventive measures have been started years ago? In early childhood, long before bullies emerged and started heaping abuse on their peers. Increasingly, neuroscientists, psychologists, and educators believe that bullying and other kinds of violence can indeed be reduced by encouraging empathy at early age. Over the past decade, research in empathy, the ability to put ourselves in other person's shoes, that suggested that is key, if not the key, to all human social interaction and morality. Without empathy, we could have no cohesive society, no trust, and no reason not to murder, cheat, still alive. At best, we could act only of our self-interest. At worst, we could be a collection of sociopaths. Although human nature has historically been seen as essentially selfish, recent science suggests that it is not. The capacity for empathy is believed to be innate in most humans, as well as other species. Chimps, for instance, will protect unfair treatment of others, refusing to accept a treat they are rightfully earned in another chimp doing the same work fails to get the same reward. The first stirrings of human empathy typically appear in babyhood. Newborns cry when hearing another infant cry, and studies have shown that children as young as 14 months offer unsolicited help to adults who appear struggling to research something. Babies have also shown a distinct preference for adults who help hinder others. But like language, the development of this inherent tendency may be affected by early experience, as evidence look no further than ancient Greece at the millennia-old child-rearing practices of Sparta and Athens. Spartans who were celebrated almost exclusively as warriors raised their ruling class boys in an environment of uncompromising brutality, enlisting them in a boot camp at age 7, and starving them to encourage enough deviousness and cunning to steal food, which skillfully bred yet more generations of ruthless killers. In Athens, future leaders were brought up in a more nurturing and peaceful way, at home with their mothers and nurses, starting education in music and poetry at 7. They became pioneers of democracy, art, theater, and culture. Just like we can train people to kill, the same is true with empathy. You can be taught to be a Spartan or Athenian. You can taught to be both, said Terry Gross, executive director of the Outreach Group Institute for the Study and Practice of Nonviolence in Providence, India, a former sergeant in Israeli army. What the ancient Greeks intuit is supported by research today. Childhood, as early as infancy, is now known to be critical time for the development of empathy. And although children can be astonishingly resilient, surviving and sometimes thriving despite abuse and neglect, studies show that those who experience such early trauma are at much greater risk of becoming aggressive or even psychopathic later on, bullying on other children and being victimized by bullies themselves. Simple neglect can be surprisingly damaging. In 2007, researchers published the first randomized controlled study of the effect of being raised in an orphanage that studied that subsequent research on the same sample of Romanian orphans found that compared with babies placed with a foster family, those who were sent in institutions had lower IQ, slower physical growth, problems with human attachment, and difference in functioning in brain areas related to emotional development. Institutionalized infants do not experience being the center of a loving family's attention. Instead, they are cared for rotating staff or shift workers, which is inherently neglectful. Such children miss out on intensive one-on-one affection and attachment with a parent figure, which babies need at a vulnerable age. Without that experience, they learn early on their world is a cold, insecure, and untrusted place. Their emotional needs having gone unmet, they frequently have trouble understanding or appreciating the feelings of others. Nearly 90% of the brain growth takes place in the first 5 years of life, and the mind of young children who have been neglected or traumatized often fail to make connections between people and pleasure. That deficit can make it difficult for them to really demonstrate love later on. You can enhance empathy by the way you treat children, says Martin Hoffman, an emeritus professor of psychology at Newark University and a pioneer of empathy research. Or you can kill it by providing a harsh punitive environment. The cold environment of an orphanage can be considered on the spectrum of punishment, at the other end of which is simple child discipline, an issue that sometimes confounds even the most mindful parents. How do you teach a child right from wrong without being too tough or slipping into abuse? Who among us has not raised our voice? Okay, screamed, while disciplining our children. But shouting at or worse hitting on children results in fear rather than in understanding on child's part of why he or she is being punished, say researchers. Over the long term, the routine use corporal punishment such as spanking not only fails to change behavior for the better, but has also been shown to increase aggression in children. Instead of starting from the assumption that you have to beat the badass out of the child, turn on that empathy and compassion switch, says Thatcher Keltner, professor of psychology of the University of California, Berkeley, and the author of Born to Be Good, The Science of Meaningful Life. In other words, start by teaching children to understand their own behavior and feelings. It provides the basic tools of understanding the behavior and feelings of others. For instance, when dealing with a child who has hurt another person, help him or her anchor how they felt in the moment, says Mary Gordon, founder of Roots of Empathy, a school-based program designed to foster compassion. We always think we should start with how do you think so-and-so felt, but you will be more successful if you start you must have felt very upset. The trick is to help children describe how they felt, and so that the next time this happens they have got language. Now they can say I am feeling like I did when I beat Johnny. When children are able to understand their own feelings, they are closer to being able to understand that Johnny was also hurt and upset by being beaten. That switch is the spark for change in behavior. By understanding suffering alone does not teach empathy, and this says Gordon, which helps explain why children who suffer more enduring abuse at home, for instance, are more likely to become bullies. It's not that they don't know what it feels like to be hurt, it's that they have learned that violence is the way to express anger or assert power. In Gordon Roots of Empathy program, which is currently being used is about 3,000 kindergartens, elementary schools, and middle schools in Canada and 40 schools in Seattle. Children get to see a visiting parent and infant interact with the classroom about once a month and watch the foundations of empathy being built. When the baby cries, the Roots of Empathy instructions helps the mother and students think about what might be bothering the baby and how to make things better. Students are taught that crying baby isn't a bad baby, but a baby with a problem, but trying to figure out what's going on. The children learn to see the world through the eyes of an infant, and to understand it might be like to have needs, but not to be able to express them clearly. We love when we get cockly baby, says Gordon, because then the mother usually tells the class how frustrating and annoying it is when the baby won't stop crying. That gives children insight into the parent's perspective and how children's behaviors can affect adults, something they have seen often never know about it. If you look at development of empathy, one of the key features is the perspective taking, says Gordon. In coaching that skill, we help them to take the perspective of their classmates. To date, 9 separate studies have shown that roots of empathy has helped to reduce bullying at school and increase supportive behavior among students. Many school districts in the US, including New York City, have recently expressed interest in using Gordon's approach. Setting an empathetic example. A child's individual capacity for empathy can further be encouraged when parent models empathetic behaviors themselves. When parents treat the other people with compassion, selflessness, and lack of judgment, children copy those behaviors. Empathy can't be taught, but can be caught, says Gordon. Her own family was a shining example. As a young girl in Newfoundland, Gordon said that she grew in a large, multi-generational family, including 4 siblings, 2 grandparents, and a mentally disabled uncle. That also often includes stress. Her parents liked to take the people in need, unmarried pregnant women who had no place to go, recently released prisoners who would stop for a free meal. Gordon also tagged along with her mother, an artist of Gordon's father was the Canadian Minister of Labour, and she visited poor families in the community, bringing them food, clothing, coal for the heat. For heat. When young Mary sneered and asked why the woman stored coal in her bathroom instead of bathing in it, her mother admonished her, but in private, my mom would never embarrass anyone, so she wouldn't embarrass me as a child either. She saw the dignity in everybody. Gordon says, in the car, she said, will you judge that woman when you made that face? She would said, she's made of the best decisions she could in the challenges she had, and you don't know her challenges. Not every child is raised by a mother Gordon, but every children who have survived birth environments like the gang members of Tenny Goss of the Institute of the Study and Practice of Nonviolence works with the providence, can be helped to catch empathy. Gross has found that his outreach workers were most successful when they build relationships based on caring and fairness. People have a sense of justice, Gross says, explaining why even troubled teens respond well when counselors with whom they have an ongoing relationship take firm stance with them regarding their behavior. Our kids are used to injustice. They are used to abuse at school and from the police. But when constraints come from a place of love and caring, people don't think it violates their sense of justice. Gross' program focuses on introducing young men and boys in gangs to a new network of people who not only care about them but also dependably, providing the kids of secure environment that many of them missed in childhood. By employing former gang members to mentor the troubled boys, Gross makes it easier for them to foster relationships of mutual understanding and connection with one another. Mentors show up consistently at the boys' important events, court dates, funerals, demonstrating care and concern. They also organize social hotlines for the boys, like a trip to a local beach last summer for a day of surfing. That excursion purposely included boys of rival gangs, in the hopes that the introductions could help reduce violence later on. Indeed, research shows that simple exposure to other kinds of people in the friendly setting can increase your empathy towards them, although some gangsters and sociopaths may never be reachable. Gross holds out hope. He points to statistics that as never halving the US murder rate over than 20 years. That suggests that a different life is possible. It's not easy, but it's not in common sense. He says, Szalavitz is the co-author of Born to Love and Why Empathy is Essential and Endangering Morrow of April 2010. Comments. This article proposes empathy is a learned personality trait which is essential for satisfying human relationships. Young children are directly affected by the degree of empathy of their caregivers model and teach. Parents and schools who are proactively teach and young kids who how to identify and understand their and other people's feelings in various situations that help their kids develop empathy. Young children traumatized by neglect and abuse tend to show aggression in behavior, for example, bullying later. The implication of these research-based ideas are profound. One implication is that unempathetic, wounded parents are unlikely to encourage empathy in their kids, so this development deficit passes down on generations and weakens our society. Lack of empathy is part of the sixth psychological wound. It contributes to emotional unavailability in many CWZs, grown wooden children, including sociopaths and psychopaths. Secondly, these findings suggest that the highest need for teachers can be educated to the roots of empathy and motivated to help students develop it. The findings also suggest the value of teaching family and school counselors, social workers, daycare, and church school staffs, family-like educators, and pediatricians about empathy development. Third, these findings can help explain why survivors of low nurturing childhoods have difficulty communicating and solving relationship problems effectively. Lesson 2 and 4 here. The core of effective communication is personal and social awareness, which is needed to sustain the two-person awareness bubble. The fourth implication of these findings is that psychological wounded people may deny they are unempathic because they don't know how empathy feels like. So they feel normal and are unlikely to keep and seek help for a crippling problem. For more perspective, see the CUCLA research report, How Family Environments Affect Children's Health here. This article on difficulty bonding with other people, an overview to the powerful skill of empathetic listening, perspective on grown wounded children, this guidebook for assessing and reducing psychological mood, who's really running your life. Thank you very much for listening to me. Comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell button. For donations and consultations, the email down below. I ask you to share the video on the social media, and I invite you to check the other playlists I have about enlarging your perspective of the reality, for example. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye.